Hi, Lil.
How are you?
I'm good.
Are you I feel like I should do a podcast thing, but I
Good.
so today we're going to talk about a book that we read together when I was a little kid. Um so first I wanted to ask you just a few intro questions. So first of all, what is the book that we are discussing?
It's called A Summertime Song by Irene Haas. It's one of my favorites that we read.
And how old do you think I was when we read this book together?
It was given to you when you were born. So I would say probably pretty young. And you really liked books. So I can imagine could have been even maybe 2 or 3. And we just kept reading it because then you had your brothers. And, um, I have a feeling you got different things out of it over the years.
It was a book that I returned to.
Well, I don't know if it was because of you or because of me, because I really liked it. So, yeah, it was in our favorites.
It's in the repertoire.
Yeah,
Cool. And so why did you like it? Why did you want to read it over and over again?
I think you liked it too. You loved there's ice cream in it and birthday cake in it. I loved it. I loved it because it was sort of a sophisticated children's book. I felt like the narrative is sort of dreamlike, and there's not it assumes intelligence of the child, and I really liked that, and it was enjoyable for me to read too because it's beautiful, and the way it's written gives the person who's reading it aloud a lot of chance to kind of add inflection and add voices and make it come alive. It's not just something to be told, it's something to be sort of felt through, I think. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I also, because I really vividly, I don't remember much of the narrative of the book. Like when you brought that up, I immediately knew the images of it and I
Mhm.
immediately knew the ice cream.
Yeah, yeah,
um, which looking at the pictures you sent me is not actually at the birthday party, it's at the end.
yeah, the resolution.
Yeah, the resolution is having ice cream with the grandmother that she lives with
Yeah,
or staying with maybe. But I think that it's a very tactile book in a way.
yeah.
Um, or maybe it's just about what kids pick up on when they're reading books like that or looking at illustrations.
When you say tactile, do you mean in terms of the pictures or in the descriptions?
I think in terms of the pictures,
Okay.
because, or at least for this one, for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, like the images just stayed. And maybe that's just because I'm a very visual person, but I think also when you're a tiny kid, you're really drawn to illustrations and you're really
Yeah.
drawn to like I don't know, the like fantasy of things, but also like objects that you recognize in your own world, and,
Yeah.
but presented in sort of a more beautiful or dreamlike way, as you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a
I,
book.
I think that's also what I like about it too, is that when you're reading it as a kid, you see different things in it. It's a watercolor. I'm showing you a picture. It's a watercolor. And at first, the little taxi that they're riding in, you think it's a taxi, and then you realize it's a bird's nest. And
Yeah,
it's almost like a sort of hunt and find kind of picture where you look at it and you're like, oh wait, that's a flower, but it's its hat, and oh, that's you see different things when you
yeah,
look at it. It's not literal, and I really like that about it.
yeah. And I think that kids really respond to like complex illustrations. Like I think there obviously there's different ages, but I like what you're saying about assuming intelligence because I think that when you assume intelligence of children, especially in like stories or illustrations, they get a lot more out of it because their imagination is as like rich and vivid as it's ever going to be.
Absolutely.
And I think that like I really responded to really complex illustrations as a kid.
Yeah.
Like Willa has 10 minutes till bedtime.
Oh, I love that book.
Yeah, which is a great book, and I've been reading it with her, and I've been remembering like all the different hamsters that
Yeah,
are like really funny.
yeah.
But like I don't know, like, and it's like the Easter egg thing. It's like the more
Mhm.
you look at a
Yeah,
picture, the more you see.
yeah,
And I think that's true of this book because
yeah,
it's so layered. And it's also just very, very beautiful. Like the illustration of the bird's nest is like amazing how light
yes,
the bird's nest and the little girl
yes,
both are compared to the rest of the
yes.
background.
It's you get an impression of things, which I think allows your imagination to fill in the details. And I think if we're reading to sort of enrich children, then that's a real service, is to not serve it up as here's what you should see. It's more of a suggestion and an opening for them rather than a direction. I
Yeah.
also think that the way it's written invites imagination. It doesn't give all the background, it just jumps in with something like uh, the baby bird, why don't you fly? There's no background on that. We didn't see the bird not flying, but all of a sudden it says that, and it's a question of that's asked of the bird, and the bird is vulnerable and says, I'm too scared to fly. It creates this sort of um, I don't know how to explain this, but like a story within a story that gets resolved. There's a lot of these little stories that just get introduced out of the blue, but are completely recognizable as a universal human experience that I think children can recognize. Oh, I'm scared. Like that's a feeling everybody has. And I think that's also why I really like this book, is that the child can put himself into each of these characters' experience. One little mouse is rushing along because her husband wouldn't wait for her to make her new chapeau, and the child doesn't even have to know what a chapeau is
Mhm.
to feel that feeling of being rushed along.
Mhm.
And as the book goes along, it's sort of like teaching that you can have these problems, you can have these challenges and struggles, and they get resolved. And
Mhm.
even though I think you said that it sometimes felt scary to you,
Yeah.
I also think it's really important to open up in a safe way scary things in a safe way that then can be resolved. So you learn moments of being afraid or being scared are not always permanent, and
Yeah.
that you can trust that surprising good things happen. The scary owl turned out to be the person they were having the birthday party for,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. And I wanted to bring that up because I think that like a lot of it is about these reversals or about the like what you're saying of these tiny conflicts that get resolved. And
yeah,
the narrative isn't so much about what happens to the little girl who's sort of going to this party. It's more about just like the coming together of all these different plots.
yes, yes,
And I don't know, I guess, and I like, and on the fear thing, like I think that there's something. Oh, here's what I was going to say is that it's also very close to home, or like the story itself takes place in her garden. Like she gets the invitation and
yeah,
she goes out into the garden, and I think it says like a moonbeam touched her and she was suddenly small.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
it's about like, and so it's like fantastical because there's all these different creatures that she's meeting. There's the inchworm, there's,
yeah,
this is all from what I saw online and what I
yeah,
was looking in the books because I haven't read it in a long time.
yeah,
uh, but she meets all these different creatures who are familiar, and they're things that a child can recognize. They're, oh, I see baby birds, I see
yeah,
inchworms,
yeah,
I know about owls if I haven't seen one.
yeah,
um, and it's about sort of the magic of your own world that's familiar, that I think is really compelling for especially really young kids.
yeah. In
They're
some ways, do you think that, to me, that adds to the safety of it? It's not like this child's transported somewhere far away from everyone she knows and loves. She's in the safety of a nearby space in a backyard she's familiar with, and having these different experiences.
Mhm.
As you were saying that, I also think like it's teaching empathy,
Yeah.
like that now when she looks at an inchworm,
Mhm.
there's a different experience of that inchworm than maybe there was before. Now she sees the inchworm inching and thinks, oh, maybe his little inchy feet hurt, he has to inch every day all the time. And just there's so much rich messaging here
Yeah.
in a wholesome way, everyone is kind in this book.
Yeah.
There is such kindness to each other.
Yeah. It's and I think that like when you're putting it into terms of like archetypal conflicts, I don't even really know which one it fits in because it's not like man versus man. The characters aren't really at odds with each other.
Hmm.
When the owl like frightens the taxi full of creatures, like it's by accident. It's because
Hmm.
there's a misunderstanding and they don't necessarily know that it's his birthday party.
Yeah.
And then when he comes to the birthday party and they're all afraid, he I think when like the picture I was looking at, and you can probably corroborate because you have the book in front of you, he's like, "Oh, you remembered. Thank you."
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And it's so pleasant. Like there's no I don't know how familiar you are with Miyazaki films.
Nothing.
Like
No,
Spirited
none.
Away. There's a lot I've seen online about how those films are very like the conflicts are not even I guess like the villains in those movies are given a lot of like empathy and a lot of understanding, and like things are sort of resolved very naturally and without a lot of the like anger and that you typically see in conflicts.
Hmm.
I think part of it is because it's like he's Japanese, I think.
Hmm.
So it's not an American conflict.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's not like, oh, we're gonna fight and yell. It's very just okay, like this is what has happened.
Yeah.
Um, but I also think that's part of like the intelligence thing too. It's that you're just presenting a world in which the characters accept each other.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yeah.
the thing that's scary about it is not even necessarily what happens, it's just the unfamiliarity and the mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there an archetype that has to do with sort of overcoming your personal struggle?
Yeah, yeah, man versus self. So I guess it would be man versus self.
Because each creature has a little challenge they are overcoming and coming together. It just and being kind to each other about their infirmities or whatever it is that's hard for them.
Yeah,
And
yeah. He can't fly, but his feet hurt.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, and the kind, I don't know, some archetype about kindness, like that kindness always wins, is always a better choice.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, they didn't confront the owl, they ran away because they didn't know what to think of the owl. But then when the owl came and the owl was was receiving their kindness, they were kind to the owl. They didn't say, "Well, you were so mean to us before." They just resolved it with kindness.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like
just
universal balm or something.
yeah, definitely. And I guess I don't remember if there's like what the little girl's experience is, or I think that like I guess I'm trying to think of more why I felt that the book was kind of scary as much as I liked it. Um,
I
which
mean,
is also something we should talk about, which is like how I did really like this and I remember enjoying it, but also being frightened by it.
yeah.
Um, and but I'm what like does the girl how does the girl get home at the end?
There's an interesting sort of theme also where this little doll comes up as a
Oh, the
character,
little doll who's
and
lost.
the little doll says, "I've been lost for so long. She lost me in the flowers one moonlight night." And the little girl brings this little doll along with all the other little creatures
Mhm.
and brings it back to her grandma. And her grandma says, "Oh, you found him." Because
Oh my
and the
god, I
grandma
forgot about
apparently had been singing the sad song about losing him one night, and you don't
that.
know if she's singing about a doll, but then this doll comes back to her and she's so happy.
Mhm,
So there's a theme also about losing things and finding things.
mhm.
Are you crying?
Right.
Oh, what is that? What is touching you?
Well, it's just so sweet, and I forgot about that part of the book that it's the grandmother's doll and that like the little girl I think gets to I guess you can sort of imagine that she's like walking in some steps that her grandmother walked in.
Yeah.
Or like I don't know, and I guess it's nice that that's true, but you don't understand much of the backstory. It just all sort of wraps itself together, and it's also about, I don't know, because you can think of the doll as the little girl too, as like being lost and far from home and somewhere
Right.
unfamiliar, and then coming back to her grandmother.
Right. And the grandmother as a child in a way, like
Yeah, and
having
the
lost
grandmother is still
something.
a child. She still cares about the doll, and she's
Yeah,
still happy to see the doll.
yeah, yeah. And then there's this funny thing at the end. I don't mean to step over your emotion.
No,
Sorry.
no, no, it's an interview.
Sorry.
Being unprofessional.
It's a, I mean, I feel that way about some of these books too. Like there's something that's really moving about like not only the memory of reading them to you, but also just the there's beauty in them.
Yeah, and I think that like I don't know, like children's things make me cry more than anything else. Like, and
Yeah.
you know, I just love children's materials. That's why I'm doing the newsletter. That's why I like only watch children's television shows. So I like Adventure Time.
Yeah.
But I think that there's just something really special about like the way children relate to things like that. And I think also the thing that was sad and scary about the book for me was that little doll.
Yeah.
Like I remember that being sad.
That
I remember the
someone would lose something and long for it for so long.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because you think she lost it all when she was a child, and now she's had 2 generations come from her.
Yeah. 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 And then that she's happy again. You know,
Yeah.
she's I just noticed something that in the final picture, which you remember as the ice cream
Yeah.
scene, where that there's an owl, toy
Oh,
owl
really?
on the table.
There's an owl on the
That
table?
that's an owl, that black and white checkered thing.
Oh, it's a doll.
But it's an owl.
Oh.
It
Oh.
sort of adds to the like dreamlike kind of angle of this that
Yeah.
it's made up of things that she's familiar with. You know how
Yeah.
kids sometimes make scary things to be bigger than them, you know? And I don't know. That
Yeah.
it could be a
Oh.
dream, could not be a dream.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that also when you said that it's dreamlike, because I think you I think there's one way to interpret the story as just a dream that the little girl has, but I prefer it as just she actually goes into her garden.
Yeah,
And I think that's sort of more like narratologically compelling.
yeah.
Um, because I also just because dreams are really real to children too. And those experiences in the imagination, I think, is really real to children.
I
And I
think
think that there doesn't have to be much of a differentiation
right.
between that.
Right, because they're not looking at it critically. There's this natural suspension of disbelief that fairies are real,
Mhm.
that people can become small as bugs, that you could be friends with an inchworm,
Yeah.
you can ride in a
The
nest
baby bird.
taxi. You know,
Yeah. Those things are all, and that's the thing that's really beautiful about like children and talking to children and
yeah,
experiencing children. So I wanted to bring up the fact that like I was obsessed with fairies as a child, and I was obsessed with like tiny worlds, and like I had so many fantasies of becoming small and like
interesting.
going into like either the garden or like the house, or I just like that was, I guess that's like a genre of just like being small in the actual world.
Yeah,
And that was something that I was just completely fixated on as a little kid.
yeah,
And I don't know if it's because of this book or because of all of the stories that I read that were sort of about that, but
yeah. It's amazing the capacity that you had for putting yourself in a situation like imagining being in the fairy house and then creating the little pathway and creating the little world of rocks and yeah, I wonder what that's about. Like is that safer, is that because yeah, I haven't thought about that actually.
yeah. Well, I think is a big part of like my philosophy about books is something that if you remember Mr. Kaup,
Oh yeah,
the lit teacher,
yeah,
he always used to say that like he he repeated this all the time, and I talk about it all the time, where he would always say, you can never actually know another person because you are always like contained within your own brain. So you can
Yes.
never, ever know what it's like
Yeah.
to be somebody else. But the closest thing that you can get to that is by reading a book, because those are like words. And I think art also fills this
Uh,
sort of thing where you can look at something and it goes into your head and you have your own associations with it and it makes you feel something.
yeah.
Um, and it's something that came directly out of someone else's
Yeah.
like own subjectivity.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to get really meta, I feel like tiny worlds and going into tiny worlds and feeling out something that is both familiar but different because you're suddenly smaller is also sort of about the act of reading.
Yeah. Yeah. You are in that book. You can imagine yourself in that story completely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I don't know. I think dreams are also a big part of that too.
Yeah.
I think that going into like being able to visit somewhere else
Yeah.
in a dream. I don't know. I just think, and I don't know enough about child psychology in order to really say like what that means for like a child's development or for like, I don't know, I guess like intellectual growth.
Yeah. Well,
But
what was it like for you when you were immersed in a world like this book? What was that? Was it pleasure?
it was,
Fear?
I don't know. I think about this sometimes too, because it was very real.
Yeah.
I think that like since I've become a like reader, writer, artist, I like, and I don't know, I hesitate to say that this is everyone's experience, but at least for me, like I it was about going somewhere else and being someone else and being in another world that was unfamiliar but safe because I was still in my own world. Like I still existed and
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Yeah.
But
So were
like,
you enjoying your own brain? Like playing
yeah,
in your own mind?
yeah, it was like it was playing. It was, and I mean, I also loved fantasy games and like
Yeah.
making up worlds.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of just like existing somewhere else
Yeah.
and seeing what that was like.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, this is what it's like in the fantasy garden. This is what it's like in like Harry Potter world, or
Yeah.
I don't know, any number of other
Yeah.
places that were fun to go.
In some ways, I wonder if it has to do with proficiency or competence outside of adults. Like when
Yeah,
you're in a separate world, you are solving your own problems in a way.
yeah.
And
Well,
each,
there's something that we can talk about too with this book.
yeah,
Continue.
because
I interrupted you.
no, no. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
No, we both interrupted. I feel like it's like so much of books or a lot of children's fiction is about the child on their own, and that's what like sort of the trope of having your parents dead is about, like
Yeah.
in like Disney movies and
Yeah.
fairy tales. Like it's about independence, and it's because like children can't and shouldn't really have independence because there's the world is big and scary, and like they need their parents to sort of guide them and protect them. But it's about sort of maybe that first glimpse of independence,
Yeah.
and like I guess also like psychologically about like being separate,
Yeah.
which is something I talked about in that newsletter about Hello Baby,
Yeah.
about how like when like around like 6 months to a year old, you're like separating from the
Yeah.
mother or just or the primary caregiver
Yeah.
and figuring out that you are your own person.
Yeah.
And I feel like the next step is sort of like reading, or I don't know, just about like learning how you exist in the world and how you are a separate entity. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying. It's the process of differentiation, and
Mhm.
I think kids do it in um, leaps and bounds. Like they take a big leap at some time. Sometimes it happens. I don't know if I mean that.
Yeah, well, I think
They,
there's there's moments of differentiation.
Yeah,
There's like, and whether that happens through like literature or playing or like
right.
I got left behind at school or something like
And in the book, for instance, it's thrilling and terrifying.
yeah.
Be differentiated. And she has this example of each of these creatures
Mhm.
solving their problem. And
Yeah.
she's not trying to solve it for them. She's observing them dealing with their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and in a way I think that's sort of interesting about the character, the little girl who's the protagonist of the book
Yeah.
is that she's like it's not about her.
No.
She's sort of a vehicle for the child to enter this world.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what you were saying, you can easily imagine yourself as her.
Yeah. 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 And she's one of them. So in a way, she's also solving her own experience, resolving her own experience in a way.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's about leaving home, but
Yeah.
being close to home.
Yeah. 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 It is so I think kids probably get different things out of it at different times,
Yeah,
you know.
and that's sort of the beautiful thing about books when
Right.
you're a kid is that since you're changing and growing so quickly,
Yeah.
like the book changes with you in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. It's interesting though that you came away, your remembrance of this was scary.
Yeah, but not I don't know. I guess like I don't want to say that because I also remember really liking it.
Okay. But that's
But
true too. Kids like being scared a little bit,
yeah.
you know, when it's resolved fairly quickly. It's sort of thrilling to be scared.
Yeah. And I think also part of the scariness is like is sort of related to what you were saying about assuming intelligence is that like the book doesn't ease you into it.
No,
You're
it's
just
it
in.
startles you. Yes.
And I think that the books that stuck with me the most are the ones where you're just thrust into the world and it's like, oh, this is happening. Like we considered talking about The Funny Thing,
Yeah.
which is also sort of a weird not creepy book, but it's like there's this creature that you have to feed little like balls of
I
dough.
know. I want to have a whole other discussion about that because I
Yeah,
when I was picking the books, I read that one too, and I was like, there's something here that bothers me a little bit. So I want to talk about that.
we can
And
talk about it. What bothers you about it?
it feels like Bobo is manipulative a little bit. He,
Bobo is the man, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He, I mean, do you really want to do this right now, or
Yeah,
do you want to keep this purely on this book?
no, we can talk about it. This is
Okay.
free flowing.
Fine. Okay. So in that book, Bobo, the little man, makes treats for all the little creatures that come to visit him. And one day, this dragony looking thing comes and visits him and says, "What do you have for me?" And Bobo says, "I have all these treats." And this thing says, "Those are not good for me. What do you have for me?" And Bobo was very upset that he didn't have something, and he thought and he thought, and then he realized that this creature has these blue points on its tail and is very proud of them and is very vain. So Bobo manipulates this creature and says, and he mushes together all the treats into these little things and says, "They're jumjils. They're
Jill.
for you." They make blue points even more beautiful and tails grow even longer. So basically, Bobo manipulates the thing with its own vanity.
Hmm.
But it resolves that the creature then is not bothering anybody. It goes, sits up on a mountain and enjoys its tail. And
Yeah.
so it's a good
So
ending.
bonds grow, right? It does
Yeah.
actually work.
Yeah. But it bothers me that Bobo sort of, I don't know what that message is. Is that good to tell children that you manipulate people?
Yeah. Because I think on one hand, like with that book, is that it's a question of viewing who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist.
Yeah.
How do you view that kind of interaction? Because I think if you view because the funny thing comes in and like demands food,
Yeah.
and Bobo, in a way, Bobo's maybe manipulating himself because he prides himself in
That's
I
true.
feed the animals,
That's true.
and he's freaked out that he can't feed the funny thing.
Yeah, I
And
can't
in a
tell if
way,
that's ego or not, though. I
yeah,
think there could be benevolent Bobo who just likes feeding people. He's
yeah,
not doing it for his ego.
yeah. But then it's, I guess, if you process the funny thing as like a threat, is it like he's sating the dragon? Like, is that
Yeah.
the archetype we're working with, or is it that?
Oh yes, remember because he says I eat dolls. And Bobo says, "Oh, you eat dolls, children's dolls, aren't they sad?" And Bobo and the funny thing says, "Oh yes, they are sad." Like, and Bobo says, "This is terrible. The children should not lose their dolls." So I will. So that I guess that's what makes him make the jumjils.
Yeah,
It's justified.
yeah. But it's a different message than the summertime song, because
Yeah.
it's not about sort of understanding and acceptance and this like journey of just like this is what's happening to me. It's
Mhm.
like, how am I going to solve this problem? And
Yeah.
I guess it's presented as manipulate, like, because there's a reason that you're getting that from the book.
Right.
And I guess it's presented as manipulation. It's present like, because you see Bobo's internal process
Yeah.
and he's sort of like, how am I gonna get this dragon to stop
Yeah.
eating dolls? And
Yeah.
then he lies. He doesn't tell him like, I'm mashing all the food together. He
Right.
just says, these are jumjils, they're different and they're for you.
Yeah. And I think we're supposed to understand that he's lying, that
Yeah,
they make your tail longer and they make your blue points even more beautiful, that he's made that up. How,
yeah. How could he know?
right.
Until it works. And then is it about just the power of belief?
And I guess one takeaway could be solving problems. Like you can figure out a solution
Mhm.
if you pay attention to what other people want. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what to take away, but it was fun to read to you guys, but now that I look at it, I'm wondering if that's a good message.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's so much of what my newsletter is about, is like, what is this actually saying? Like,
Yeah,
what's actually underneath this? And I think it's possible that underneath the funny thing is like not such a great message after
right.
all.
Which is interesting that Charlie really liked that book because was always and continues to be up in arms at people lying to him or being manipulative.
Yeah.
So, but he loved that book.
I yeah. I think you must relate to the dragon more.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so maybe he didn't realize that the dragon was being manipulated. I don't know.
Or maybe I don't know. That's a conversation that would be interesting to have with Charlie.
Yeah,
About what it was that he liked about that book.
I'm a little.
But on the other hand, it is just sort of a funny story about like weird, and the illustrations are pretty compelling. They're very like mythical. This is not our world.
Yeah,
But
it,
that's another
it's
example of a book that just puts you into it.
it's true, and that it's like a version of the familiar world, like a little man who lives underground. Like we know what men are, we know what homes are, but this little Bobo guy
Mhm.
lives in a hole in the mountain.
Yeah.
So it's like it is things that are familiar, similar to like nests and worms and baby birds. We know these things, and then there's a twist on it
Mhm. Yeah.
that opens up imagination, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Definitely. I don't know. That one I'm intrigued and concerned by the book in a way that I wasn't before.
Yeah, I was too. When I read it, I was feeling a little dirty. Like I I read this to you guys, and I mean, I feel very good about the summertime song. So
Yeah. Well,
uh,
it's a very sweet.
it's very sweet, and there's a lot of sort of, I don't know, just like conversations in there that, like, one this paragraph. And when Lucy offered Madame Mouse 20 gumdrops to make a chapeau for her cat, Mr. Mouse was astonished. 20 gumdrops just for a hat, he exclaimed. And that's it. That's all we hear. Like it's this whole world in that one paragraph that Lucy wants a hat for her cat. She has 20 gumdrops. Like who has 20 gumdrops? And that what's a mouse going to do with 20 gumdrops? And that seems like a lot of to pay. Like it's so rich in that.
How does she know that that's the kind of currency that they want?
I don't know, but it's 4 lines that are so rich.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this author.
Yeah. And I think that's really true of writing in general, that I think people sometimes, and with children's writing, I think you sort of feel that you have to explain things to,
Yes, this
or
doesn't.
many, yeah, many adults feel that you need to like build the world, you need to say like, this is why this is, and this is what
Yeah,
you're experiencing. But
you're
yeah,
right. This is assuming intelligence that a child can do something with that brief amount of information, and it's sort of like it's the minimum needed
yeah,
to really give an experience. It's
yeah,
not it's not simpler than it has to be,
uh-huh,
but it's not more complex than it has to be either. It's just
yeah.
right.
I think one of the best tenets of writing is to assume that just like the reader is so much smarter than you will ever be,
Yeah,
and to
yeah,
just give them
yeah,
whatever it is. And
yeah.
I think, I don't know, I think that that's the most compelling children's work, is
Yeah,
that which just presents itself to you.
yeah.
And
It
I think
really,
sometimes, sorry, go ahead.
well, all I was going to say is the illustrations combined with the text really give a child a lot to work with here,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
a lot to like love,
Mhm.
because who doesn't want to be that little girl who becomes small like a little beetle
Yeah,
and gets to go to a birthday party where they wear flower hats and fly on birds and
yeah. The
yeah.
hats are great in that book. I remember the hats just
Oh,
being
yes, me
fantastic.
too.
She gets a little like paper party hat, right?
Magic paper party hat, but then everybody else has different like flowers and different things that they're wearing, and there's a cricket carrying a flower like thing, the staff like carrying a flower around as a party thing, and I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about, but I think also just parties are really compelling to kids.
yes,
Like
birthday
parties
party.
are like a birthday party is something that you really know, but like I guess also just elaborate parties are sort of their own world.
Yeah,
And that's something that I love about parties, and I love costume parties and themed parties and
yeah,
this weird like creating an alternate reality for an evening
yeah,
thing. And I think kids love parties.
yeah,
They love costumes, and they love just,
yeah.
I think it's also just being outside of your own world, which
Right,
is interesting because so much of childhood is discovering the world.
right. I
But I don't know.
I also like that this is an elaborate party using what they have already. They're making things out of flowers and out of nests, and so they're having an elaborate party that isn't manufactured. They're just sort of creating out of what they have. There's a resourcefulness to it
Yeah.
that
Just like the way that she's creating this narrative or this experience out of the things that she knows.
yeah,
And
it's a value. Like to me, that's a value I want to communicate to my kids, and it's communicated without being direct. It's
yeah.
communicated in a much more powerful way because it's communicated through the experience rather than directed and
Mhm.
prescribed.
Yeah. And I think that's a value that I've held on to. Like I think also you were just very artistic with us. Like we always made our own Halloween costumes,
Yeah.
and like, we're very resourceful in that way.
Yeah.
And I'm
There's such
definitely much more drawn to things that are like handmade, and like you create things out of things you already have.
yeah.
I don't know. I was reading something recently about how like I think it's in the book I'm reading right now, about like how imitation, when it's too exact, feels unreal.
Mm.
But when you take something that, and it's not going to capture sort of the core of the thing that you're trying to imitate.
Mhm.
So like when you have a party and you're trying to imitate like an adult party, if you have all of the like adult things, and you get really exact, you might not necessarily actually get at the core of what the party's about. But when you have like the flowers and like the just, this is a party in this world, is
Yeah.
that's sort of at the core of like celebration and
Right.
people coming together.
Yeah. And it's interesting to hear you talk about how it's impacted you as a grown-up, because I think that the underlying value beneath that is sort of self-reliance and self-determination and competence, that you can do things, you can be resourceful with what you have.
Mhm.
There's something safe about that,
Yeah.
knowing that about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And I think it's also grounding. It's like using the world as it exists to you.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's a lot there.
Yeah. And combining things that aren't naturally combined necessarily, like a taxi and a nest,
Yeah.
creating something new out of two different things.
Yeah. So that is, I think, also part of this idea that, like, if there was a little taxi cab in the garden, or like even if is she also the illustrator? Or is it a different illustrator?
Um, I think I think she must be.
Okay.
It doesn't say illustrated by anyone else.
Then that's also great. I love
That
when
is.
writers are also illustrators.
I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess also, if she had chosen to have like a lost toy car that just happened to be a taxi, that's so much less compelling.
Absolutely.
That's
Right.
like just like, oh, like whatever, of course. But it's
Right.
so, and it's proving that things can be other things. It's proving that you can look at a bird's nest and see a taxi or a car or a boat
Yeah.
or any number of things.
Yeah.
And I think that's really useful to kids because they're very much in the process of drawing connections
Yeah.
between things in their world, and
Right.
that's what imagination's about.
It's interesting too, the difference it would have been if it had been a flying nest.
Yeah.
It's a taxi nest and it has wheels.
Yeah.
So, like, to me, that seems a lot more reasonable, I
Yeah.
guess. I
And I
mean,
love that it's a taxi that the baby bird is employed.
and the reason it is driving this taxi is it would rather stay in its nest than fly. It's too
Yeah.
afraid to fly. So he takes his nest with him. I mean, he's very resourceful in
It's
dealing with his fear.
He's making it work. Does he fly at the end?
Yeah, the inchworm teaches him to fly, which is also absurd. But
That's great.
it's really, there's funny little things like when the bird, it says, "Baby bird, why don't you fly?" She asked him. "I'm too scared to try," he answered. "What I like to do best is to stay in my nest." Then he tried to whistle a tune,
He's funny.
which I love that she added that in there, because like it just says so much with that.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna whistle a tune, like,
Well, it adds so much personality. Like you
yeah.
said, it makes it very real without, like, I don't know, you don't have to do that much work to make something feel real, I guess
I'm
is maybe the core of this
It's,
talk.
well, I don't know. I think it's very hard.
Yeah.
Like, actually, the
Not
best,
that much.
simplest writing is so hard.
That's true. But I guess you don't have to be too elaborate in order to make something work, is about
Right. But how do the words that you pick to communicate that this little bird was like a little uncomfortable sharing that and wanted to be cool and like stop the conversation.
tried.
Right. You could have said
Uh,
he was embarrassed, but instead, then he tried to whistle a tune, not
yeah.
just then he whistled a tune. Like, I just think simple is hard. It's like fashion and clothes. Like, the most elegant, simple things are the hardest things to make
Yeah.
because there's so much underneath and
Mhm.
thought behind them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I don't
I
know.
guess so. Here's a closing question
Yeah.
for this discussion. Um, I guess just what do you think is the, and we've also sort of touched on this throughout the discussion. Like, what do you think is the use of reading to children? What do you think happens when a parent reads to a child? Like, what do you think that's about? And what did it mean to you? Like, why? Like, also because I think you sort of pushed books onto all of us, and you were an English major. Books are important to you.
Yeah.
Um, like, what's your thought process there as a mother?
Well, I mean, besides the fact that I really value reading and really value art and the combination in these intelligent books. I didn't love like the little Fisher Price books at all. I loved these kind of books.
Mhm.
So exposing you guys at an early age to things, it's sort of like brainwashing you into appreciating them. But
Yeah.
also, there is a really visceral pleasure in sitting and cuddling up and sharing an experience with your child,
Mhm.
that we're both entering into this world together, and and it's almost like a reinforcement of that safety of child and parent. Like, I'm reading you this book, I'm here with you. There may be little scary parts. I'm gonna make the like startling parts even more startling by the way I read them. Yeah, that you're safe because you're right here with me, and you are able to imagine yourself there. So you can kind of leave me and go into the book,
Mhm.
and then I'm always there. It's sort of a like a microcosm, or so, I don't know what the word is, but of what real life is. When you're a 2-year-old kid, you go away a little bit and you come back, and you're safe to go away because you know your mom's still there.
Mhm.
It's sort of similar where we can explore things that are separate and becoming differentiated for
Mhm.
you in a safe way.
Yeah.
It
That's
just, I don't know, I think it's like a trust building
Mhm.
and a sort of like giving you somewhere to go in a way, like
Yeah.
helping you start thinking and imagining for yourself too.
Yeah.
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 It's their experiences. If you pick the right books, it's an experience that the kid is having, not just entertainment. It's
Definitely.
it's the pleasure of imagination, not just here's what firefighters look like in kid cartoon, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot because I've been just re-immersing myself in Richard Scarry
Mm.
lately.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yes.
But because, and I think that it's not like this is just what firefighters look like, but like his all of his major books are like his first big one is the best word book ever. And
Yeah.
it's just like drawings of everything,
Yes.
names attached to them. And it's so
You
simple.
loved those.
Yeah.
Loved them.
Yeah.
And honestly, I loved them when I was a kid. That
Yeah.
was my favorite when I was a kid. That Richard Scarry is great at also infusing each character with personality. So that lowly worm had a personality.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yep.
loved lowly worm.
I know. I saw there's a I think maybe it's I think a book that came out after he died that was like from things he had written during his life, but his son published it for him. That's I think just about Lowly Worm, and I've been looking at pictures of it online, and there's like a line where it's like, and he lives with the cat family, which I didn't really realize.
In an
Really?
apple. Yeah.
Yeah. And he and there's a line where it's like he wakes up in the morning and he washes his foot. He just doesn't wash.
Because that's what good people do. They wash their feet when they wake
Yeah.
up, right?
And it's like his defining characteristic, just the
Yeah.
one foot.
Yeah. And he hops along.
Yeah.
You threw so many lowly worms, Lily. You made so many lowly worms.
My friend who subscribes to the newsletter after I sent out the most recent one that's about that book that's a Richard Scarry illustration, but it's not like in the Busy Town universe.
Mhm.
Um, I think because I talked about Lowly Worm in it, my friend texted me and was like, I didn't realize that you didn't make up Lowly Worm.
That's
He was like, it just
hilarious.
looks like something you would draw.
That's really funny.
Nice. And so I was like, maybe everything I've done is because of Lowly Worm.
It's possible. Lowly made you who you are.
Yeah, yeah.
And it took me a while to like, you know how you don't put together like lowly worm?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he's like as in on the ground,
Oh.
lowly,
But he's walking, so why is he called that?
but he's a lowly worm, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very funny. Yeah.
No. And I think half of it is because his name sounded like my name to me.
Oh,
Like
lily worm. Yeah,
Lily
lily.
Worm, Lowly Worm. Also because I think Charlie called me Lolly, Lala.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
So it was, I don't know.
Oh, it's so
It's
funny. All the things that are like,
psychological something to be done.
yeah,
Why I was obsessed with Lily.
which makes it like just accepting that the kid's brain is like a dream world. Like it doesn't have to make sense. There's going to be like, Abraham Lincoln talking to the cat, and like there's
Yeah,
all kinds of like
yeah.
crazy things that are going to be mashed together
Uh-huh.
that are, yeah, it's a sad thing that they get lost as adults because
Yeah, I think the ability to think, the ability to hold many truths that don't make sense at once is something that kids have. And I think
yeah,
that adults lose that. And that's a part of, I think, the difficulty that many Americans have,
yes,
that many
yes,
things can be true at once.
yeah.
Uh, I don't know. I think that's sort of not like the key to being alive, but like close to it. Just that.
There's a lot of happiness in that. There's a lot of
Well,
peace.
it's about just accepting the world as it is. The world is not ordered. Like the
Right,
universe does not make sense at all.
right. And there's very few things that are actual facts. Like we have so much judgment of each experience and each thing that it's really subjective.
Yeah,
We forget.
totally. And I think that we as adults like want to order the world so badly.
Yeah.
I think especially if you're a kid, which is I think unfortunately true for like a lot of people because like when you think about who has access to like this kind of book,
Hmm.
it's really not that many people have access to like a lot of books about like really like imaginative creative like work because
Right.
I don't know, like you had the really lucky privilege of deciding that you didn't want us to just read the Fisher Price books, but
Right.
like
Right.
those are the ones that are cheap,
Right.
probably.
Right.
And like,
They're mass available. This takes a little bit more reading for me to decide if I like it or not.
yeah,
'Cause
and
luckily, this was a gift. So, I feel really grateful for that. But I think that's sort of true in every way. Like
yeah,
it's so much easier to just consume what is served up rather than be um, discerning which you
yeah,
what you want to consume. Yeah.
definitely. And I think that I think on like sort of a structural like class level, when you like aren't able to access books that encourage a disordered world,
Yeah.
which is I think what like a lot of children's books are about. And so if
Hmm.
you're not really exposed to reading as a kid, it's harder to
It's true.
empathize, it's harder to see outside of your own reality. So I think that like you get a lot of hate coming from that in some ways. I don't
Interesting.
know. I don't know. I just think there's a really significant connection between books and empathy.
I
And
agree.
I don't mean
I,
to be like a elitist English major.
well, I think it's important for us to recognize that it is a privilege to be able to choose and to have the time to pick things that matter and that I had the opportunity to read to you.
Yeah.
That's all the value of time and just having access to things that not everybody has, but I feel like this kind of thing definitely had an impact on who you became as an adult. And so I guess the point is that well, is that just elitist to say we want to share that experience with as many people as possible? Maybe that is. I don't know.
I think that I just I don't know. I think that, well, okay. I think that there's a way that it can be elitist, but I also think that like stories exist in every single culture on every continent. Like that's one of the few things that I think is really universal is that people tell stories. No
Yes.
matter how that's going to happen, I think that in sort of Western culture, the emphasis is on books and writing and like the written word.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've seen a lot recently that I grapple with personally about how like white supremacy is linked to like privilege of or like not privilege like putting the written word on a pedestal, which is hard for me because I
Right.
do put the written word on a pedestal
Right.
and that's just part of who I am, but
Right.
I guess I just want to interrogate that for myself about like,
Yeah.
well, how much of it is elitism? How much of it
Right.
is white supremacy?
Right.
But I think that stories are true across everyone. And I think that it's a way of understanding the world. I think religion is part of that. I think science is part of that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important for kids to have stories that show them how to learn about the world and how to learn about themselves. Like no matter how those stories are going to come across.
Right. If it's an oral tradition or
Yeah.
made up
Or
as
television
just
or
folklore from your family. Yeah.
yeah, like any way that that is going to come across because it does come across that way
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting that we're drawn to this because we really like this kind of thing,
Mhm.
because I grew up with a mother who shared this kind of thing with me.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe I think the bottom line value is allowing kids to have imagination.
Yeah.
That's really,
Fostering that imagination.
however it's facilitated, that's something I think is super important to honor, is that time in a person's life where their brain is able, as you said, hold all these competing truths.
Hmm.
That's super valuable,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I think that's true. That's a great note to end on.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
Lily.
Thanks, Mom.
All right, I'm going to stop.
Just end the recording.